I always thought silence would be the most sacred part of a wedding. The hush before vows, the held breath before a promise. But the silence that fell in that gilded hall wasn't sacred. It was suffocating. My veil trembled in my fingers, not from nerves, but from something deeper. A tremor of instinct, perhaps. I should have known. I should have felt it. Julian's hands were cold when he touched mine. His eyes were flicking, not soft like they used to be, not anchored to me. Searching. Calculating. Then the whispers started, a ripple through the crowd. I could hear them even through the string quartet's polished notes. The music died mid-phrase. Julian stepped back, not gently, not with a whisper of regret, but with the sharp precision of a man cutting a cord he never truly intended to keep. I can't do this. I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. The white roses in my bouquet suddenly weighed 100 pounds. My heart pounded in my ears like drums from some ancient battlefield. Julian turned to the crowd, his voice rising, not with shame, but with performance. She lied to me, to all of us. She's not who she says she is. Her father's a mechanic, not a CEO, not anyone important. She pretended to be someone she's not just to marry into this family. Laughter. Not from everyone, but enough to make the blood drain from my face. Behind me, my mother clutched her purse like a shield. Her, knuckles white, her head lowered, not a word from her lips. The wedding coordinator dropped her clipboard. Cameras flashed. Phones lifted. Murmurs bloomed into chaos. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. My legs were lead, my throat a locked cage. I felt hollow. Not even hurt yet. Just removed. Like watching someone else's nightmare, unfolding frame by frame. Then I saw her. Lilith. She stepped forward in a champagne-colored dress that clung like it had been designed for this moment. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. She had his arm, and that was enough. Julian kissed her cheek, my fiancé, my groom, right there on the altar, while guests gasped like they were watching a scandalous finale on a reality show. Everything. Blurred, except for one sound, one voice. Deep. Calm. Commanding. That woman is my daughter. The room went silent. The man who had spoken stepped forward from the back of the hall, cutting through the rows of stunned onlookers like a king parting the sea. Silver hair, dark suit, face that carried the weight of decades, and eyes locked, directly on me. I didn't know him. At least I didn't think I did. His voice was steady. Claire belongs to my family, and no one treats my daughter this way. I couldn't breathe. The crowd shifted again. Cameras swung. Julian's expression flickered. Confusion, then panic. And me? I just stood there, torn veil fluttering in. The air conditioning, mascara bleeding quietly down my cheeks. A bride-turned statue. Shattered from the inside out. I didn't know whether to fall. Or follow the man who'd just called me his. A year before the wedding, I was living in a third-floor walk-up that always smelled like peeling paint and burnt toast from the neighbor downstairs. The walls were thin, and the heater coughed all winter, but it was mine. Well, ours. Me and Mom. We shared it like we always had. Her hands calloused from factory work, mine blistered from waitressing and late-night typing for my MBA assignments. I met Julian on a Thursday morning, behind the register at the cafe off Kensington and 5th. I was half awake and running on fumes when he ordered a double espresso and mispronounced my name with the kind of confidence that made it sound intentional. Claire, right? You seem like a Claire. I laughed. I let him charm me. He came back the next day, and the next. Then one day, he didn't just leave a tip. He left a business card with a number scribbled on the back and a note that read, "You deserve more than coffee. I should have known." That kind of charm always comes with fine print. but I was tired of scraping by. Tired of watching my mother come home with aching feet and pretending not to notice the eviction notices slipping under the door. Julian was different. He dressed like he walked out of magazines I couldn't afford, but talked to me like I mattered, like my story didn't bore him, like I was chosen. He said he admired my ambition, that my background didn't matter, that he found it endearing, how hard I worked. He took me to places with cloth napkins and water that sparkled instead of still. He kissed my hand like we were in a black and white movie. And when I told him about my dad, how he left when I was 3, how my mother raised me alone on a mechanic's wages, he just smiled. "I'm not marrying your past," he said. "I'm in love with your future." I clung to that sentence like scripture. When I met his mother, she wore pearls and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Oh," she said, shaking my hand like it was wet laundry. "You're the one from the university, yes? How nice." She made me feel like a hand-me-down. Still, I tried. I brought flowers. I brought wine. I brought silence when it was safest. Dinner parties were the worst. Everyone spoke in shorthand. Trips to Monaco, stock fluctuations, art auctions. I once asked what Rothko meant, and a woman in a velvet shawl tilted her head like I was speaking another language. Still, Julian would touch my leg under the table and whisper, "Don't mind them. You're real. That's what I love." Real. As in raw, as in unfinished. But I started polishing the edges anyway. I sold my grandmother's ring, the only thing of real value I had, to help Julian bridge a sudden gap in a business deal. "Just for a few weeks," he said, brushing the hair behind my ear. "You're my partner, my other half." I gave it willingly. Told myself it meant we were building something together. Told myself he'd do the same for me. That's what love was, right? When he proposed, I said yes before he finished the sentence. Later, I found the ring box tucked in a drawer labeled Past Options. I laughed it off, told myself I was being paranoid. That was just Julian, organized to a fault. Surely he didn't mean those women. Then I met Lilith. She was all porcelain and poise, introduced herself with a smile so wide it bared teeth. "Julian's told me so much about you," she said, like a lie dressed in velvet. "He said they were childhood friends, practically cousins, nothing to worry about." But her lipstick stayed on the rim of his wine glass after a dinner party. Her name popped up in late-night texts. Once I heard him mutter her name in his sleep. Still, I believed him. Because love, when it's wrapped in silk and validation, is easy to mistake for safety. I buried the ring box in the closet. I buried my doubts under spreadsheets of flower arrangements and guest lists. I buried myself in a dream of a wedding that could make me feel worthy. I started speaking less at dinners, dressing like his mother, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. I learned the language of money without having any of it. Looking back, I realize I wasn't building a future. I was building a paper castle, beautiful from a distance, fragile in the rain, and I had no idea the storm was already on its way. I used to think pain was loud, screaming, breaking things, running barefoot through the streets in a storm kind of pain. But it turns out, real pain is quiet. It creeps in like fog under the door. It lingers in the spaces between breaths, in the clink of a spoon against a mug you no longer drink from. The morning after the wedding, I woke up still in the dress. I didn't remember getting home. My shoes were on the floor, one upright, the other turned on its side like a broken limb. My veil was tangled in the bed sheets, a torn ghost draped across the pillow beside me. I don't even remember crying. I just remember the stillness and the silence. But the world wasn't silent. Not at all. It screamed in headlines. Groom walks out on fake heiress. She lied to me, he says, rejected at the altar. Who is Claire Hart really? Humiliation in high heels. Viral wedding disaster. My phone buzzed nonstop until I threw it against the wall. Even then, it kept blinking from under the dresser, lighting up like a heart that didn't know it was broken. I stopped checking the news, but the comments still found me. On old photos. In my inbox. Gold digger. How could she think she belonged in that world? He did the right thing. Imagine finding out the woman you love lied about her father being a CEO. Lied. As if I'd ever said that. Julian told his version so often, so confidently, that even I started to question my memory. Had I implied something? Had I ever exaggerated? I don't think I did. But the truth doesn't stand a chance once it's buried under perception. I lost my job quietly, like everything else. My boss called me into his office with a tight smile and said, "You've been such a valued team member, Claire, but with everything going on, we feel it's best to give you some time to sort things out." Time. As if shame had an expiration date. Mom stopped talking. Not in a cruel way, just emotionally disappeared. She moved through the house like a wind-up doll, cleaning dishes that weren't dirty. She blamed me, I think. Or blamed herself through me. I caught her crying into her coffee one morning. She never looked up. I started to disappear too. The mirrors in the house stayed covered. Not on purpose. Just dust, laundry, blankets thrown over furniture and grief. My reflection scared me. My face had changed. I looked older. Washed out. Like someone who had been weathered by salt and storm. I didn't eat for days. Didn't speak. Didn't feel real. I burned the wedding photos in the sink, one by one. I watched Julian's smile bubble and curl into black ash. I held the edge of a photo, where he was kissing my temple, burned it last, just so I could feel the sting a little longer. People kept reaching out at first. Friends. Bridesmaids who weren't really friends but posted aesthetic selfies of my destruction anyway. "So, sorry babe, love you." They stopped texting after I didn't reply. Or maybe I blocked them, I can't remember. Time melted. Days bled into one another. I lived in my robe. Sometimes I didn't know what month it was. And then the letter came. A single cream envelope left on the stoop. No stamp, no return address. Just my name in a heavy ink that bled slightly at the corners, like it had been written with too much pressure. Inside, 3 lines. "We need to talk. I owe you the truth. You were never meant to be forgotten. VAI." Stared at it for hours. Victor Alden, the man who stood up at my wedding like a ghost from another life and called me his daughter. I still didn't understand it. Was it a trick? Some bizarre power play? A cruel joke wrapped in pity? I didn't respond. But I didn't throw it away either. I tucked it under my pillow like a secret. Like a bandage I wasn't ready to peel back. Some nights, I held it in my hand and just stared at the ceiling, because even though I didn't trust it, some part of me needed it to be true. Not because I wanted to be a billionaire's daughter, but because I wanted someone, anyone, to say, "You are not as invisible as they made you feel." I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I don't think I even told myself. I just packed a duffel bag, locked the apartment behind me, and walked to the train station like a woman leaving behind a skin that didn't fit anymore. No forwarding address. No phone. Just a cottage by the sea I found listed under a different name on a dusty community board. Cash only, no questions asked. It was small. 1 bedroom, chipped white paint, a crooked fence covered in wild ivy. The kind of place people pass without noticing. Exactly what I needed to be. Unseen. There were no mirrors inside, not even in the bathroom. At first, it startled me. Then I realized it was a relief. I didn't want to see my own face. Not yet. Not until I knew who it belonged to again. I slept on the floor the first few nights. The bed creaked too loudly. I ate whatever I could boil, mostly soup and dry bread. I stopped measuring days by dates. I measured them by tides. High meant stillness. Low meant grief. But I started painting. I wasn't an artist, not by any stretch. But I bought cheap brushes from a bait shop in town and found old canvas boards in the attic. At first it was just color. Swirls of crimson and slate and blue. Then shapes. Then outlines of women, faceless mostly. Their hands always open. Their spines arched like they were dancing or falling or both. It gave my hands something to do when my chest felt too tight. Gave my mind somewhere else to go. Every morning I walked along the cliffs with the wind howling in my ears, salt in my mouth. The ocean didn't care who I used to be. It didn't ask for explanations. It just pulled and pulled, carving new shapes, into the rock like time always wins. I whispered secrets into the waves like they were old friends. Sometimes I imagined the sea erasing everything Julian ever said to me. Every lie, every performance, every time he called me real like it was a novelty. I kept the wedding dress. I folded it into a crate in the back of the closet. Never looked at it. Never threw it away. I think part of me needed the weight of it. Proof that the past happened. Then one morning, a shadow passed across the frosted window. I opened the door to find an envelope tucked neatly beneath the mat. No name, no return address. Inside, a photo. A young woman, smiling with her whole body. Her hair long and windblown, her eyes unmistakably mine. My mother, younger than I'd ever seen her. Beside her stood a man, Victor Alden, and in her arms, a baby. Me. My throat closed. My hands trembled as I stared at the image. Not staged, not posed. Just a moment, frozen in time. The way his hand cupped her back, the way she leaned into him instinctively, it wasn't forced. It was familiar. I didn't cry. Not right away. My body went still, like prey sensing danger and awe at the same time. That night, I dreamt of a hospital room. White sheets, fluorescent lights. My mother sitting beside a crib, whispering through tears. He can never know. It's better this way. I woke up gasping, my skin damp with sweat, the photo clenched in my fist. I watched the sun rise from the edge of the cliff, the wind burning against my cheeks, and I knew I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want redemption. I just wanted the truth, because all my life I had been told what I was worth, and it was never more than what I could give, or fake, or sacrifice. But now, I had a thread, a beginning, something of mine. So I reached out. I wrote to Victor, just one line, "Tell me what you never said." Then I waited, not as a broken woman, but as a daughter standing at the edge of her name, ready to take the first real step. Victor's driver didn't wear a suit, just a windbreaker and a quiet smile. He called me Miss Hart, and I didn't correct him. The ride to the estate took 3 hours, most of it through winding roads and tree tunnels that flickered light and shadow across my window like a reel of old memories. I kept the photo in my pocket the whole way, my thumb brushing the edges until the paper wore soft. When we pulled up, I expected opulence. Marble floors, gold fixtures, staff lined up like chess pieces. What I saw instead was a home, weathered stone, wild ivy curling over old window panes, a garden left untamed. And when the door opened, Victor himself. No staff, no pretense. Just a man with silver at his temples and apology in his eyes. "Claire," he said, like he'd rehearsed it in silence for years. I didn't hug him. I didn't even shake his hand. But I stepped inside. The living room smelled like cedar and orange peels. A fire crackled gently in the hearth. He motioned to the armchair across from his and poured 2 cups of tea. "I never stopped looking," he said, voice low. "Not after she left. Your mother, she was terrified. My family was ruthless back then. They had plans for me, marriage, legacy, appearances. She didn't want you to grow up beneath that shadow." I sipped the tea. It burned my throat, but I didn't wince. "She said you could never know," I murmured. "That it was better that way." He nodded. "And maybe she was right, but I think she underestimated how strong you'd grow to be." The silence between us stretched. Not awkward, but reverent. A shared wound finally seeing daylight. I didn't forgive him. Not immediately. But I believed him. Over the next few weeks, I stayed in a guest house on the edge of his property. He didn't coddle me. He didn't try to buy my affection. Instead, he offered something I'd never received from a man before: knowledge. He taught me how to read balance sheets, like poetry, how to trace hidden assets, how to ask the right questions in a room full of people trying to lie. "You don't need my name," he said one night over dinner. "You already have your mother's fire. I'm just giving you a match." That was the first night I slept without dreaming of the wedding. I started rebuilding, quietly, deliberately. I filed a DBA under a new business name, Salt and Slate Consulting. I used what I had learned, my MBA, my experience in operations, even the way Julian had run his investments, to build something mine. No glamour, no borrowed shine, just grit and strategy. Victor funded my startup, but not blindly. He made me pitch it, challenge it, defend it. And I did. For the first time in years, I earned my footing instead of shrinking to fit someone else's mold. Then one evening, while reviewing quarterly filings from publicly listed companies, I saw it. Julian's name, tucked into a series of LLCs, disguised through 3 layers of holding companies. And worse, he had used a portion of my loan to him, my inheritance from my grandmother's ring sale, to buy into a fraudulent healthcare investment. Inflated numbers, ghost facilities. It was going to collapse. And when it did, it would take dozens of elderly investors' life savings with it. I didn't feel rage, just clarity. The man who once kissed my wrist and called me real had used me as leverage, not just emotionally, but financially. And he would do it again, to others, over and over. So I began the quiet work of unraveling him. Emails, leaked financial reports, old correspondence from his father's company archives. Victor still had access to many of them. I created a timeline, built a case. Not for court, but for truth. It wasn't revenge I craved. It was reckoning. I wanted the world to see what I had seen, and more importantly, I wanted to stop him before he hurt someone else. One night, while painting by the fire, abstract lines in red and ash, I caught my reflection in the window. For the first time, I didn't look broken. I looked whole. Looked like my mother. And I smiled. The invitation came in the form of irony. A glossy cream-colored envelope addressed to my old apartment, forwarded by a former neighbor who had no idea what it would mean to me. Inside was a card, gold embossed, over-designed, grotesquely perfect. "You are cordially invited to the engagement celebration of Julian Rothwell and Lilith Vance, black tie, champagne reception, rooftop gala at the Grand, the same hotel where our wedding was supposed to be. I stared at it for a long time. Not with rage, not even with sadness. Just a strange, distant curiosity, like reading an obituary for someone who had already died in your heart. I placed it beside my paintbrushes and left it there for 3 days. On the 4th, I pulled out the red gown. I hadn't worn it before, not even tried it on. Victor had it custom made for a charity gala I never attended. "Wear it when you're ready," he'd said. I hadn't understood what he meant until now. It wasn't revenge I was dressing for. It was closure. The gown slipped over me like memory. Fitted silk, sharp neckline, the exact shade of blood and dignity. I pinned my hair back. No earrings, no necklace. I wanted them to see my face, unhidden. The heels clicked softly against the marble floor of the Grand's lobby as I walked in. Heads turned. Of course they did. Red always draws the eye, especially in a room where everyone else is dressed in black, gray, and champagne. The elevator ride was slow. I could hear my own breathing, steady but deep. My fingers tightened around the folder I carried, no thicker than truth needs to be. The rooftop was lit like a dream. Fairy lights, crystal flutes, a jazz trio murmuring elegance into the air. Laughter floated above the crowd like bubbles. And then I saw him. Julian. His back was to me, hand resting lightly on Lilith's waist. He was saying something into her ear, something that made her laugh with her whole throat, too loud, too proud. And then he turned. His smile faltered before recognition even bloomed. Eyes locked on the red. Claire? The music didn't stop. The room didn't freeze like some movie, but the air shifted, heads turned, whispers ignited. I walked toward him slowly, not rushed, not theatrical, just certain. I stopped a few feet away. "Hello, Julian." His mouth opened, then closed. Lilith's hand gripped his arm tighter. "I'm not here for drama," I said. "Just truth." I handed him the folder. At first, he didn't take it. I waited. Eventually, he reached out and opened it. His eyes moved across the pages. First confusion, then dawning horror. Balance sheets, wire transfers, timeline of misappropriated funds, cross-referenced with my original transaction, the one I had made for him, the one that was meant to be love, not capital. A final page, contact information, for the SEC. This is absurd," he stammered. "Is it?" Lilith leaned over to look, her face drained. "You used my name," I said. "My trust, my money. And now, others are at risk. You didn't just throw away a woman, Julian. You underestimated a legacy." His parents were nearby. I hadn't noticed, but his mother's face had gone waxy with shock. Victor stepped out of the shadows. He'd been waiting by the elevator, as promised. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He was presence. He was proof. I turned to leave before the fallout began. Behind me, voices rose. Papers shuffled. Glass broke. But I didn't look back. The media, of course, had a field day, but this time the headline wasn't "Fake Heiress Exposed." It was, "Woman who was publicly rejected at altar exposes multi-million-dollar fraud scheme." They wanted interviews, sound bites, tears. I gave them only one. I stood beside Victor in a modest navy suit, no makeup, no dramatic lighting, and announced the creation of the Heart Foundation, a quiet organization. Not splashy. No black tie galas. Just a space for women rebuilding after betrayal, emotional or financial. A place where shame didn't grow and silence didn't win. I said, "My piece." Then I left. I returned to the coast not as an escape, but as a choice. The cliffs welcomed me like an old friend. The sea sang the same song it always had, but this time I understood the lyrics. I painted again. Not women in anguish, but women rising, women laughing, women barefoot in fields or standing in courtrooms or holding their daughters in the soft glow of morning. The wedding dress still lived in the crate in the closet, but one day I opened it, not to cry, but to cut. I tore the fabric into long strips, dyed them, wove them into a canvas, and on that canvas I painted a woman in a red gown standing in the middle of a ballroom, smiling, alone, unafraid. It hangs on my wall now, across from the window. So every morning, when I walk barefoot through the dew and breathe in the salt and the sky, I remember I am not the girl he left at the altar. I am the woman who walked away in red. And this time, my footprints don't disappear.